The morning sun painted the Afghan mountains in shades of gold and crimson as Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell adjusted her scope for the third time. Her hands were steady, her breathing controlled, but something felt different about this mission. The intel had been sketchy at best. A high-value target supposedly hiding in a compound 3 clicks north of their position. What the briefing hadn't mentioned was the woman who seemed to appear and disappear like smoke in the wind. Sarah had been with SEAL Team 6 for 2 years now, one of only a handful of women to earn her place among the elite unit. She'd proven herself in countless operations across 3 continents. But Afghanistan had a way of humbling even the most experienced operators. The terrain was unforgiving, the enemy unpredictable, and the local population caught somewhere between survival and loyalty. Through her binoculars, she watched the compound below. Mud brick walls surrounded a modest courtyard where goats wandered freely. An old man sat in the shade, working on what appeared to be fishing nets. Everything looked normal, almost peaceful. Too peaceful for a Taliban stronghold. "Overwatch, this is ground team. We're moving into position," crackled through her earpiece. Team leader Commander Jake Rodriguez's voice was calm and professional, but Sarah could hear the tension underneath. They all felt it, that electric feeling in the air when something was about to go sideways. Sarah scanned the surrounding area methodically. Her job was to provide cover and watch for threats the ground team might miss. The mountains offered countless hiding spots, and she'd learned to trust her instincts about when they were being watched. Today, those instincts were screaming. A flash of movement caught her eye. On a ridge about 800 meters to the east, something had shifted. Sarah focused her scope on the area, adjusting for the heat shimmer rising from the rocks. There, a figure in traditional Afghan clothing, but the way they moved was all wrong. Too fluid, too purposeful. And they were carrying something that definitely wasn't a walking stick. "Ground team. Possible sniper position 800 meters east of your location," Sarah reported, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "Copy that, Overwatch." "Can you confirm?" Sarah held her breath and watched. The figure seemed to sense her attention and froze completely. For several seconds, neither moved. Then, in a display of skill that made Sarah's blood run cold, the figure shifted position with an economy of movement that spoke of professional training. Not Taliban. Not local militia. This was someone who knew what they were doing. The compound erupted into chaos as the ground team breached the main gate. Shouts in Pashto echoed off the walls, followed by the sharp crack of gunfire. Sarah kept her focus split between providing overwatch for her team and tracking the mysterious sniper. Through her scope, she watched the figure, definitely a woman now that she could see more clearly, take aim at the compound. The woman's rifle was old but well maintained. Probably a Soviet-era Dragunov. Sarah could see the careful way she handled it, the professional setup of her shooting position. This wasn't some hastily trained insurgent. This was a marksman with serious skills. Sarah had a clear shot. The woman was focused on the compound, unaware that she was being watched by someone with equal training and better equipment. One squeeze of the trigger and the threat would be eliminated. Standard operating procedure. Clean and simple, but something made her hesitate. Maybe it was the way the woman moved, with a grace that reminded Sarah of her own instructor back at sniper school. Maybe it was the fact that despite having multiple opportunities, the woman hadn't taken a shot at any of Sarah's teammates. She was waiting for something, but what? The answer came 30 seconds later when Sarah heard Rodriguez's voice over the radio. "Overwatch, we've got civilians in here." Repeat, multiple civilians, including children. This intel was bad. Through her scope, Sarah saw the mysterious woman lower her rifle slightly. She'd heard the radio chatter somehow. Or maybe she could see what was happening in the compound. Either way, her body language suggested she was standing down. "Ground team, be advised, your shadow is holding position but not engaging. I think she's waiting to see what you do with the civilians." The extraction took 20 minutes. Sarah's team pulled back without firing a shot, having confirmed that the compound housed an extended family of refugees, not Taliban fighters. As they moved out, Sarah kept her scope trained on the eastern ridge. The woman was gone, vanished as completely as if she'd never been there. But something glinted in the rocks where she'd been positioned, something deliberately left behind. That evening, back at base, Sarah volunteered for the recovery mission to retrieve whatever had been left on the ridge. What she found made her question everything she thought she knew about the war they were fighting. Wedged into a crack in the rocks was a small piece of metal, carefully shaped and polished. It was a falcon, carved with intricate detail despite being no larger than Sarah's thumb. Attached to it was a note written in perfect English. For the professional who showed restraint. Perhaps we will meet again under better circumstances. Sarah stared at the carving for a long time, turning it over in her hands. Someone had been watching her watching them. Someone who appreciated the fact that Sarah hadn't taken the shot when she had the chance. Someone who understood the weight of that decision. As she walked back to base, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The mountains of Afghanistan held many secrets. But something told her that the woman with the Dragunov rifle was one secret that would find its way back into her life. She slipped the falcon carving into her pocket, where it would stay for the rest of her deployment. What she didn't know was that she'd just had her first encounter with a legend that the local population had been whispering about for years. A ghost sniper who protected the innocent and punished those who preyed on the weak, and they called her the Falcon, and soon Sarah would understand why. 3 weeks passed before Sarah encountered the Falcon again. This time the circumstances were far more deadly, and the mysterious sniper's reputation would become crystal clear. The mission was supposed to be routine: escort a convoy of medical supplies to a remote village that had been cut off by recent Taliban activity. Intelligence suggested the route was clear, but in Afghanistan intelligence was often wrong. Sarah's team was running point security when the world exploded around them. The IED took out the lead vehicle in a ball of fire and twisted metal. Before the smoke had cleared, automatic weapons fire erupted from both sides of the narrow valley road. Sarah's team was caught in a classic L-shaped ambush with nowhere to run and limited cover. Contact left. Contact right. Rodriguez's voice cut through the chaos as bullets sparked off the rocks around them. Overwatch, we need eyes on those firing positions. Sarah had already found cover behind a boulder and was scanning the ridgelines through her scope. She counted at least 6 muzzle flashes, probably more. The attackers had chosen their position well. High ground with multiple firing lanes and no easy escape routes for the convoy. I count 6 confirmed shooters. Possibly more, Sarah reported, acquiring her first target. Engaging now. Her first shot silenced a machine gun position on the eastern ridge. Her second took out a sniper who had been focusing on the disabled vehicle. But for every target she eliminated, 2 more seemed to appear. This wasn't a ragtag Taliban unit. This was a well-coordinated attack by experienced fighters. The battle raged for 20 minutes. Sarah's ammunition was running low, and her teammates were pinned down with wounded. The convoy personnel, doctors and nurses who had volunteered to help villagers, were trapped in vehicles that were being systematically shot to pieces. Then, from impossible range, someone else joined the fight. The first shot came from nearly a kilometer away, dropping an insurgent who had been maneuvering to flank Sarah's position. The second shot, 3 seconds later, took out another fighter who had been preparing to fire an RPG at the convoy. The shots were coming from the north, from a position that should have been impossible to shoot from given the terrain. Sarah swung her scope toward the source of the shots and caught a glimpse of muzzle flash from what looked like a sheer cliff face. Someone was shooting from a position that required mountaineering skills just to reach, let alone shoot accurately from, and they were hitting targets at ranges that pushed the limits of what was possible with the equipment available in this part of the world. Unknown shooter. This is U.S. forces. Identify yourself. Rodriguez called over the radio. The response came not through radio but through action. 3 more precise shots eliminated the remaining heavy weapons positions, and suddenly the insurgent fire became sporadic and disorganized. Without their support weapons and key leaders, the attack fell apart. Sarah watched through her scope as the surviving attackers began to withdraw. That's when she saw something that made her blood run cold. One of the insurgents was dragging a wounded American, probably the driver from the lead vehicle who had been thrown clear of the blast. The insurgent was using the wounded soldier as a human shield while retreating toward a motorcycle hidden in the rocks. Sarah had a difficult shot, maybe 60-40 odds of hitting the insurgent without hitting the American. She was lining up the shot when another rifle spoke from the distant cliff. The bullet took the insurgent in the head with surgical precision, dropping him instantly without touching the wounded American. It was a shot that Sarah, with all her training and experience, wasn't sure she could have made under those conditions. As the dust settled and her team began casualty assessment and medical aid, Sarah kept her scope trained on the cliff face where the shots had originated. She saw a brief flash of movement, someone rappelling down the cliff with fluid, professional movements. By the time she could refocus her scope on the base of the cliff, whoever it was had vanished into the terrain. The convoy mission was completed successfully. The medical supplies reached the village, and the wounded Americans were evacuated to receive proper treatment. But Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious sniper who had turned the tide of the battle. That evening, she volunteered for the recovery mission to search the cliff face where the shots had originated. What her team found there defied easy explanation. The shooting position was a narrow ledge barely wide enough for one person, accessible only by technical climbing. Brass casings from a 7.62mm rifle lay scattered around the position, old Soviet ammunition, but the shooting position itself showed signs of regular use. Someone had been using this nearly impossible perch as a sniper hide for months, maybe longer. More interesting was what they found carefully placed under a rock. Another small carving, this time of an eagle in flight, and a note written in the same precise handwriting as before. Your convoy carried healers. Some things are worth protecting. Sarah studied the carving and the note while her teammates examined the position. The unknown sniper had been watching them, had somehow known about the convoy's medical mission and had intervened to ensure it succeeded. But why? And how had they known to be in position? Back at base, Sarah began asking questions. She talked to local interpreters, village elders, and anyone who might have information about a sniper operating in the area. What she learned painted a picture that was hard to believe. For over 2 years, stories had been circulating about a ghost sniper who appeared when innocent people were threatened. The sniper had saved a school bus from suicide bombers, protected a wedding party from a Taliban raid, and eliminated drug dealers who were forcing children to carry heroin. Always from impossible distances, always with surgical precision, and always disappearing without a trace. The locals had a name for this mysterious protector: Shaheen, the Falcon. They spoke of her with a mixture of reverence and fear, unsure whether she was real or legend. Some claimed she was a spirit of the mountains, others believed she was a foreign operative gone rogue. But everyone agreed on one thing: the Falcon protected those who couldn't protect themselves. Sarah found herself becoming obsessed with solving the mystery. She studied every report of unusual sniper activity in the region, plotted possible shooting positions on topographical maps, and tried to find patterns in the Falcon's appearances. What she discovered was a level of tactical knowledge and fieldcraft that impressed even seasoned special operations veterans. The Falcon knew the terrain better than anyone, could predict enemy movements with uncanny accuracy, and possessed shooting skills that bordered on supernatural. More importantly, she seemed to have an intelligence network that rivaled anything the U.S. military had in the region. As Sarah prepared for sleep that night, she placed the new carving next to the first one on her desk, 2 small totems from a ghost sniper who seemed to be fighting the same war from a completely different perspective. Tomorrow would bring new missions, new dangers, and maybe new questions about the legend that was becoming increasingly real. What Sarah didn't know was that somewhere in the mountains, the Falcon was preparing for their next encounter, and this time it would be face-to-face. The third encounter came during what should have been a routine patrol in the Spingar Mountains. Sarah's team was investigating reports of weapons smuggling through an ancient trade route when they stumbled into something much larger and more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. The intelligence briefing had been sparse: possible weapons cache, minimal resistance expected, in and out within 6 hours. What they found instead was a fully operational terrorist training camp hidden in a complex of caves that had been carved from the mountainside centuries ago. Sarah had taken an overwatch position on a ridge overlooking the valley when she first spotted the true scope of what they were dealing with. Through her scope, she could see at least 40 armed fighters, military-grade equipment, and what appeared to be foreign trainers teaching combat techniques to local recruits. This wasn't a weapons cache, this was a regional headquarters. "Ground team, we have a problem," Sarah reported, watching as more fighters emerged from concealed positions. "I count 40+ armed hostiles, heavy weapons, and what looks like a command structure. This is way above our pay grade." Rodriguez's voice came back tense. "Copy that, Overwatch. We're pulling back to call for backup." But as Sarah watched her teammates begin their tactical withdrawal, she realized they had walked into a trap. The apparent training camp was actually bait, and her team was the target. Fighters were moving to cut off their escape routes, and she could see the glint of scoped rifles taking positions on the surrounding ridges. Ground team, you've got multiple sniper positions setting up. They're trying to box you in. How many? Sarah did a quick count, her heart sinking with each muzzle flash she spotted. I see at least 8 long-range positions, probably more I can't see. You're walking into a kill zone. The situation deteriorated rapidly. Her team was caught in the valley floor with nowhere to run, facing overwhelming odds from fighters who knew the terrain and had prepared the battlefield. Sarah could provide some covering fire, but she was one rifle against dozens. Then the Falcon arrived. The first indication was a group of 3 enemy snipers on the eastern ridge who simply stopped shooting. Sarah swung her scope toward their position and saw them sprawled motionless behind their rifles. 3 shots, 3 kills, from a position she couldn't even identify. Unknown shooter, this is U.S. forces. Rodriguez called over open frequencies. If you're friendly, we need coordination. The response came in the form of more precise shooting. Enemy positions that Sarah hadn't even spotted began going silent one by one. Whoever the Falcon was, she had identified every threat and was systematically eliminating them with clinical efficiency. But this time was different. Instead of remaining hidden, Sarah caught glimpses of the Falcon moving between positions. She was using the cave complex itself as cover, appearing at different elevations and angles to take shots before vanishing back into the mountain. It was like watching a ghost warrior who had become one with the terrain. The battle turned into a deadly game of chess. The enemy commanders, realizing they were facing a sniper of extraordinary skill, began adapting their tactics. They started using suppressing fire and coordinated movements to try to pin down the Falcon's position. That's when Sarah made a decision that would change everything. Instead of just providing overwatch, she began actively coordinating with the unknown sniper. When she saw enemy fighters moving to flank the Falcon's suspected position, she took them out. When the Falcon eliminated a threat Sarah hadn't seen, she adjusted her own field of fire to cover the gap. They were working together without ever speaking, communicating through their actions and developing an instinctive understanding of each other's capabilities. Sarah had trained with the best snipers in the world, but she had never experienced this level of tactical harmony with another shooter. The breakthrough came when Sarah spotted the enemy commander, a man in expensive tactical gear who was coordinating the attacks from a cave entrance, about 600 meters away. He was using the cave mouth for cover, only exposing himself for seconds at a time as he issued orders. Sarah had a marginal shot, complicated by wind and the target's smart use of cover. She was preparing to take it when she noticed movement from the Falcon's area. Somehow the mysterious sniper had positioned herself for a shot that Sarah couldn't see, probably from inside the cave system itself. Sarah keyed her radio on an open frequency. Target at cave entrance 600 meters south of my position. I have a difficult shot. The response came immediately. A single rifle shot echoed from the mountain, and the enemy commander dropped. The shot had come from directly behind him, from somewhere deep inside the cave complex. The Falcon hadn't just infiltrated the enemy position, she was using their own tunnel system against them. With their commander eliminated and their sniper positions neutralized, the remaining fighters began to scatter. Sarah's team was able to extract safely, but not before Sarah made another crucial decision. Ground team, I'm moving to investigate the cave system. There might be intelligence value. Negative, Overwatch. Too dangerous, but Sarah was already moving. She had to know who the Falcon was, and this might be her only chance to find out. The cave entrance the Falcon had shot from was several hundred meters away, accessible through a treacherous climb down the ridge face. Sarah made the climb with her rifle slung and her sidearm ready. The cave entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for one person, and disappeared into darkness after just a few meters. But there were signs that someone had been using it regularly. Footprints in the dust, carefully arranged stones that could serve as shooting rests. 20 meters into the cave, Sarah found something that made her stop breathing. On a natural shelf in the rock, arranged like a shrine, were dozens of small carvings. Birds of prey mostly, but also eagles, hawks, and other raptors. Each one was unique, carved with incredible detail despite their small size. Next to the carvings was a collection of photographs. Not military photos, but pictures of children playing, families at celebrations, market scenes full of life and joy. These were pictures of the people the Falcon protected, the innocent civilians caught in the crossfire of war. At the center of the shrine was a larger carving, a falcon with wings spread wide, carved from what looked like ivory. Beneath it was a note longer than the previous ones, written in multiple languages: English, Pashto, Arabic, and what might have been Russian. The English portion was simple. Some fight for country, some fight for ideology, some fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. Choose your reason carefully. Sarah studied the shrine for several minutes, trying to understand the person who had created it. This wasn't the lair of a terrorist or insurgent. This was the sanctuary of someone who had made protecting innocent people their life's mission. She left her own message, her military ID tag placed carefully among the carvings. It was a gesture of respect, a way of saying that she understood what the Falcon was doing and why it mattered. As Sarah made her way back to rejoin her team, she realized that everything had changed. The Falcon wasn't just a mysterious sniper. She was something much more significant. She was proof that in a war full of gray areas and impossible choices, someone was still fighting for the right reasons. The questions that had driven Sarah's curiosity were being replaced by something deeper: respect. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of trust. What Sarah didn't know was that from a hidden position deeper in the cave system, the Falcon had watched her entire visit to the shrine. The American sniper's gesture with the ID tag had been noted and appreciated. Soon, the Falcon would decide it was time for a proper introduction. The meeting Sarah had been unconsciously preparing for came 3 days later, though not in any way she could have anticipated. It began with a child's desperate cry echoing across the valley near Forward Operating Base Chapman. Sarah was cleaning her rifle in the equipment tent when the base's early warning systems began sounding alerts. Not incoming fire, something else. The quick reaction force was scrambling, and within minutes Sarah learned why. A local village elder had arrived at the gate with news that made everyone's blood run cold. A group of foreign fighters had taken over the village school, holding 23 children and 4 teachers hostage. The demands were simple and impossible: the release of 3 high-value prisoners from Bagram airfield within 12 hours, or the hostages would be executed one by one, starting with the youngest children. Sarah's team was tasked with reconnaissance while command worked on a response plan. The school was located in a valley surrounded by steep ridges, accessible by only one road that was certainly being watched. Satellite imagery showed the building had been modified with firing positions and barriers. Whoever had planned this knew what they were doing. As Sarah established her overwatch position on a ridge overlooking the school, she noticed something odd. There were fresh tire tracks leading to a position about 800 meters north of her location. Tracks from a motorcycle or ATV that hadn't been there during her last patrol of this area. Through her scope, she studied the distant position. It was well concealed and offered an excellent view of the school compound. Someone else was watching the situation develop, and Sarah had a strong suspicion who it might be. The hostage crisis stretched into its 6th hour with no movement from either side. Command was working on multiple assault plans, but each scenario involved significant risk to the children. The building's layout and the hostage-takers' positioning made a clean rescue nearly impossible. Sarah was growing increasingly frustrated when movement near the school caught her attention. A figure in local dress was approaching the building from the south, moving carefully but deliberately toward what appeared to be a service entrance. Through her scope, Sarah could see it was a woman carrying what looked like a medical bag. Possible civilian approaching the target building from the south, Sarah reported. Female appears to be medical personnel. Copy that. All stations hold fire unless directly threatened. But as Sarah watched the woman approach the building, something seemed familiar about the way she moved. There was a fluid grace to her steps, a professional awareness of potential firing positions and cover points. This wasn't just a brave doctor trying to help. This was someone with military training. The woman disappeared around the side of the building, and for 20 minutes nothing happened. Then Sarah's radio crackled with an intercepted transmission in Pashto, followed by her interpreter's translation. The doctor says 3 children are sick and need immediate evacuation to the hospital. Sarah focused her scope on the building's main entrance. The front door opened and one of the hostage-takers emerged, followed by the mystery woman leading 3 young children by the hand. The woman was speaking rapidly in Pashto, gesturing toward the children and then toward the road. It was a masterful piece of psychological manipulation. By presenting herself as medical personnel responding to sick children, the woman had convinced the hostage takers to release 3 of their most vulnerable captives. But Sarah noticed something else. As the woman led the children away from the building, she was subtly positioning them between herself and the school, using her body as a shield while simultaneously gathering intelligence on the building's interior. 20 minutes later, it happened again. This time the woman convinced the hostage takers that 2 more children needed medical attention for injuries sustained during their capture. 5 more young hostages were released. Sarah watched in growing amazement as the woman repeated this process 3 more times over the next 2 hours. Each time she managed to convince the increasingly paranoid hostage takers to release more children, always claiming medical necessity, always positioning herself to protect them during the evacuation. By evening, 18 of the 23 children had been safely evacuated, leaving only 5 older students and the 4 teachers inside. The hostage takers were now extremely agitated, probably realizing they had been systematically manipulated. As darkness fell, Sarah noticed movement near the motorcycle tracks she had spotted earlier. Someone was approaching her position from the north, moving with the kind of fieldcraft that suggested serious military training. Sarah made a quick decision. Instead of calling for backup or taking a defensive position, she waited. When the figure was close enough to communicate without using radio, she spoke quietly into the darkness. "I was wondering when you'd decide to introduce yourself properly." The voice that answered came from about 10 meters to her left. Speaking perfect English with a slight accent Sarah couldn't quite identify. "You left your identification tag in my sanctuary. I thought perhaps you were ready for a conversation. The Falcon, I assume. Some call me that." The voice moved slightly. The speaker was repositioning but staying concealed. "Your people call me a ghost. The local population calls me Shaheen. Names are less important than actions." Sarah kept her voice steady and professional. "You've been helping us." "Thank you. I have been protecting innocent people. Sometimes your objectives align with mine." There was a long pause. Sarah could sense the other woman evaluating her, deciding how much trust to extend. Finally, the voice continued. "The children in that building will be dead by morning unless something changes. Your command structure is too slow, too concerned with politics and perfect solutions. Sometimes imperfect action is better than perfect inaction. What do you suggest?" "The hostage takers expect an assault from your quick reaction force. They have prepared for vehicles, helicopters, coordinated attacks from multiple directions. They have not prepared for 2 snipers working in perfect coordination." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "Go on." "There are 5 armed men inside, positioned to watch all approaches your forces might use, but they cannot watch everywhere at once. And they do not expect precision fire from multiple unexpected directions simultaneously. You've been inside the building. I delivered medical supplies. I observed. I planned." The voice paused. "Your reputation suggests you are skilled enough to make this work. Are you willing to risk it?" Sarah considered for a moment. What the Falcon was proposing went against every protocol, every rule of engagement she had been trained to follow. It would mean acting without authorization, without backup, and with someone she had never met face to face. But 18 children were already safe because of this woman's actions. The remaining 5 students and 4 teachers would likely be dead by morning if nothing changed. "What do you need from me?" "Precision, timing, trust." The plan the Falcon outlined was audacious in its simplicity. Using their combined knowledge of the building layout and the hostage takers' positions, they would coordinate simultaneous shots to eliminate multiple targets while minimizing risk to the remaining hostages. As Sarah prepared her equipment for what would be the most challenging shot of her career, she realized she was about to learn firsthand why the mountains of Afghanistan had spawned so many legends about the woman they called the Falcon. The rescue operation would begin in 1 hour, and nothing would ever be the same. At exactly 2:47 a.m., Sarah settled into her final shooting position and keyed her radio one last time. "Command, this is Overwatch. I'm going dark for operational security. We'll report status when able." She switched off her radio before anyone could respond and focused on the school building 400 meters away. The Falcon's plan required split-second timing and absolute trust between 2 snipers who had never worked together before. There would be no room for error and no chance for a second attempt. Through her scope, Sarah could see the infrared chem light markers the Falcon had placed during her medical visits. Tiny dots of light invisible to the naked eye but clearly visible through Sarah's night vision equipment. Each marker indicated a hostage-taker's position and the precise angle needed for a clean shot that wouldn't endanger the remaining captives. The plan was elegant and terrifying. The Falcon had identified that all 5 hostage-takers would be visible for approximately 3 seconds when the building's generator cycled off and back on, a routine that happened every 47 minutes. During those 3 seconds of confusion as their night vision adjusted, both snipers would engage. Sarah would take the 2 targets on the eastern side of the building, the leader and his lieutenant who were positioned near the main hostage group. The Falcon would eliminate the 3 fighters on the western side, including one who was positioned directly behind a teacher being used as a human shield. 30 seconds, came the whispered voice through Sarah's earpiece. The Falcon had found a way to maintain communication despite being over a kilometer away in her own shooting position. Sarah controlled her breathing and settled her crosshairs on her primary target. The hostage-taker leader was a bearded man in his 40s who had been pacing nervously for the past hour. He was smart enough to keep moving and to stay near the children, but the generator cycle would force him to pause and listen, giving Sarah the window she needed. 15 seconds. Through her scope, Sarah could see the second target, a younger man positioned near the building's rear exit. He was jumpy and kept checking his weapon, clearly inexperienced and probably more dangerous because of it. The Falcon had insisted that Sarah take these 2 targets because they required the longer shots and Sarah's superior equipment. 5 seconds. The generator's rhythm changed, coughed once and went silent. The building plunged into darkness except for the faint glow of battery-powered lanterns inside. Sarah could see the hostage-takers, silhouettes freeze as they listened to determine if the power loss was routine or a sign of incoming assault. Execute. Sarah's first shot took the leader, center mass just as he turned toward the window where the generator was located. Her second shot, fired 1.2 seconds later, dropped the lieutenant as he was reaching for his radio. Both men fell instantly, never knowing what had hit them. Simultaneously, she heard the distant crack of the Falcon's rifle firing 3 times in rapid succession. Sarah immediately shifted her scope to check the western side of the building and saw 3 more hostage-takers down. The shot that impressed her most was the one behind the teacher. The bullet had somehow threaded between the hostages to hit the target without endangering anyone else. Clear, came the Falcon's voice. Through the earpiece, Sarah was already moving, breaking down her position and preparing to relocate as the building's interior erupted in confused voices. The remaining hostages, 5 students and 4 teachers, were alive and unharmed, but they were trapped in a building with 5 dead men and no way to know what had just happened. The rescue phase of the operation began immediately. Sarah repositioned to provide overwatch as the Falcon approached the building. Through her scope, Sarah watched the mysterious sniper emerge from the darkness like a specter, moving with fluid grace toward the school's main entrance. The Falcon was smaller than Sarah had imagined, probably no more than 5.5 feet tall, dressed in traditional Afghan clothing that allowed her to blend seamlessly with the local population. But the way she moved, the professional way she cleared corners and approached the building, marked her immediately as someone with serious military training. The door to the school opened slowly, and the Falcon called out in Pashto, then English, identifying herself as medical personnel and explaining that the danger had passed. Sarah watched through her scope as the remaining hostages emerged from the building, first the teachers, looking around in confusion and fear, then the 5 students, clinging to each other as they tried to understand what had happened. The Falcon spent nearly an hour with the hostages, providing medical attention to those who needed it, and coordinating with village elders who had arrived to help with the evacuation. Sarah maintained overwatch throughout, but her attention kept returning to the mysterious woman who had just helped her execute the most precise rescue operation of her career. As dawn began to break over the mountains, the Falcon finally approached Sarah's position. This time she made no attempt to remain hidden. Sarah watched her climb the ridge with steady, economical movements that spoke of years spent in this terrain. When they were finally face to face, Sarah was struck by how young the Falcon appeared. She couldn't be more than 30. With dark hair tied back in a practical braid and intelligent brown eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Her face bore the kind of tan that came from years of outdoor living, and small scars on her hand suggested a lifetime of hard work and harder choices. "You shoot well," the Falcon said in English, settling onto a rock about 10 feet away from Sarah. "Better than well, professional." "So do you." "That shot behind the teacher?" "I'm not sure I could have made it," the Falcon shrugged. "Different training, different perspective. You learn to eliminate targets efficiently. I learned to protect innocent people precisely. Both skills have their place." They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching the sun rise over the valley where 9 children were going home to their families because of what they had accomplished together. Finally, Sarah asked the question that had been building for weeks. "Who are you, really?" The Falcon considered the question for a long time before answering. "My name is Amira Qasim. I was born in Lebanon, raised in refugee camps during the Civil War. When I was 12, my family was killed in a bombing raid. Shrapnel took my mother, my father, and my 2 younger brothers." Sarah listened without interrupting, recognizing the careful way Amira spoke about trauma that still carried weight after all these years. "A French military advisor found me 3 days later, half dead from dehydration and shock. He brought me to a Red Cross station, and eventually I was adopted by a French military family. My new father was a sniper instructor. He taught me to shoot, but more importantly, he taught me why precision matters." Amira paused, looking out over the valley where the rescue had taken place. "I joined the French military when I turned 18. Special operations, counterterrorism, precision shooting. I was very good at it. Perhaps too good. What brought you here?" 3 years ago, my unit was deployed to Mali. Anti-terrorism operations protecting civilians from extremist groups. Standard mission parameters." Amira's voice grew harder, except the intelligence was wrong. "We eliminated a target who turned out to be a school teacher, organizing vaccination programs for children. The man we killed was saving lives, not taking them." Sarah felt a chill of recognition. Every soldier who had served in irregular warfare zones knew that feeling at the moment, when you realize the clear lines between right and wrong aren't as clear as you thought. Commanding officer said it was acceptable losses, collateral damage, the price of fighting terrorism. Amira picked up a small stone and turned it over in her hands. I disagreed, loudly. It ended my military career. "So you came here." "I came here to find a different way to fight. Not for countries or ideologies or political objectives, but for the people caught in the middle, the children, the families, the innocent ones who never chose to be part of anyone's war." Amira stood and shouldered her rifle, the same Dragunov Sarah had seen her use in their previous encounters. "For 2 years I have lived in these mountains. I know every village, every family, every child. When they are threatened, I act. When they are safe, I disappear. The carvings, the shrine, reminders. Each one represents someone I protected or failed to protect. The children from the school bombing in Kabul. The wedding party attacked by mistake near Kandahar. The farmers killed for refusing to grow poppy." Amira's voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too much. Senseless death. Sarah understood now why. The local population spoke of the Falcon with such reverence. She wasn't just a skilled sniper. She was someone who had dedicated her life to protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, asking for nothing in return except the chance to prevent more senseless killing. "Your commanders will be looking for you soon," Amira said, checking her watch. "The hostage rescue was successful, but they will want explanations for how it happened. What should I tell them?" "Tell them whatever keeps you out of trouble. The important thing is that 9 children went home to their families last night." Amira began to move away, then turned back. "You have a choice to make, Sarah Mitchell. You can continue following orders, completing missions, being an excellent soldier in someone else's war, or you can decide what you personally are fighting for." She pulled something from her pocket, another small carving, this one of 2 falcons flying together. "If you ever decide you want to fight for something more important than mission objectives, you know where to find me." Sarah watched Amira disappear into the rocky terrain with the same ghost-like skill she had demonstrated during their previous encounters. Within minutes, it was as if she had never been there at all. As Sarah prepared to return to base and face the inevitable questions about the unauthorized rescue operation, she studied the carving Amira had left behind. 2 falcons, wings spread, soaring together above the chaos below. For the first time since arriving in Afghanistan, Sarah began to question not just her orders, but the entire purpose of her presence in this ancient, complicated land. The woman called the Falcon had shown her a different way to think about warfare, not as conquest or domination, but as protection of the innocent. The sun was fully up now, and Sarah could hear helicopters in the distance, probably coming to investigate the successful hostage rescue that no one could quite explain. She slipped the carving into her pocket next to the others and began her descent toward whatever consequences awaited. But something fundamental had changed. Sarah Mitchell, elite Navy SEAL sniper, was beginning to understand why the mountains of Afghanistan had legends about a ghost warrior who chose her own battles and fought for her own reasons. Soon she would have to decide which legend she wanted to become part of. The decision that would define Sarah Mitchell's future came 6 weeks later, during what was supposed to be her final week in Afghanistan before rotating back to the United States. The mission briefing had been standard. Eliminate a high-value target who was reportedly coordinating attacks against coalition forces from a compound in the Khyber Pass region. The target was Ahmad Nazir, described in intelligence reports as a veteran Taliban commander, responsible for multiple IED attacks and ambushes. The compound was isolated, the civilian risk was assessed as minimal, and Sarah's team was authorized to use whatever force necessary to complete the mission. But as Sarah established her overwatch position on a ridge overlooking the target compound, something felt wrong. The intelligence photos showed a typical Taliban stronghold, but what she saw through her scope looked more like an extended family compound. Children were playing in the courtyard, women were hanging laundry, and the overall atmosphere suggested normal civilian life rather than military operations. Sarah keyed her radio. Ground team, I'm seeing multiple civilians at the target location. Recommend careful approach and positive identification before engagement. Copy that, Overwatch. Intel suggested minimal civilian presence. Through her scope, Sarah watched her teammates approach the compound. The supposed high-value target emerged from the main building. A bearded man in traditional dress who matched the description in their briefing materials. But he was carrying a small child and laughing at something the child had whispered in his ear. Sarah felt her blood turn cold. This wasn't a Taliban commander. This was a father spending time with his family. Someone had provided bad intelligence either through incompetence or deliberate deception. Ground team, hold position. Target appears to be civilian. Negative, Overwatch. We have positive identification based on reconnaissance photos. Target matches description exactly. But Sarah had learned to trust her instincts, and every instinct was screaming that this was wrong. She watched the man through her scope, noting his body language, his interactions with the children, the way he moved around the compound. This was someone's husband and father, not a terrorist commander. Then she saw movement on a distant ridge, a familiar silhouette that made her heart race. The Falcon was here, watching the same situation unfold, probably having reached the same conclusion Sarah had about the target's true identity. Sarah made a decision that would end her military career and change her life forever. Ground team, abort mission. Repeat, abort mission. Target is civilian. Overwatch, you are not authorized to abort. Orders are to eliminate target. Then someone needs to give new orders. Because I will not authorize the killing of an innocent man. The radio exploded with angry voices as command structures tried to reassert control, but Sarah was no longer listening. She was watching the Falcon move along the distant ridge, positioning herself between the compound and Sarah's teammates who were continuing their approach despite her warnings. The confrontation lasted 20 minutes. Sarah's commanding officer, Rodriguez, personally ordered her to provide covering fire for the assault on the compound. When she refused, he threatened court-martial, career termination, and criminal charges. Sarah's response was simple. Some things are more important than following orders. The mission was eventually aborted when satellite intelligence confirmed what Sarah had already determined. The target was indeed a civilian farmer whose only crime was resembling a Taliban commander in reconnaissance photo. The real Ahmad Nazir had been killed in a drone strike 2 weeks earlier, but the intelligence update had never reached Sarah's unit. The aftermath was swift and predictable. Sarah was relieved of duty pending investigation, confined to base, and informed that her military career was effectively over. Courts-martial proceedings would begin upon her return to the United States, with charges ranging from insubordination to failure to follow lawful orders. but on her last night in Afghanistan. As Sarah sat in her quarters wondering what her future would hold, a small package appeared on her desk. Inside was a hand-drawn map showing a location in the mountains north of base, along with a note in familiar handwriting. Some decisions require courage. Some choices define who we become. If you are ready to fight for what matters, join me. Sarah spent the entire night considering her options. She could return to the United States, face the court-martial, and probably spend several years in military prison. She could accept the end of her military career and try to build a new life with the skills she had learned as a SEAL. Or she could choose a third option that the woman called the Falcon had been showing her for months. At dawn, Sarah made her choice. She left her military equipment behind, taking only her personal rifle, basic survival gear, and the small collection of Falcon carvings that represented her encounters with the most remarkable person she had ever met. The mountain location on the map was a 3-hour hike from base. Following terrain that would make tracking difficult, Sarah found Amira waiting for her at a small camp hidden in a grove of ancient cedars, complete with shelter, supplies, and equipment that suggested this meeting had been planned for some time. "I wondered if you would come," Amira said as Sarah approached the camp. "I wondered if I would too, right up until I started walking." They sat by a small fire as Amira explained the choice Sarah was making. "There is no going back from this path. Your government will consider you a deserter. Your family will not understand. You will be alone except for the people you choose to protect. And in return, you get to decide what is worth fighting for. Every day, every mission, every decision will be yours to make based on what you believe is right." Amira handed Sarah a package wrapped in cloth. Inside was a rifle, a custom-built precision weapon that represented years of modifications and improvements. This belonged to someone like us, a Russian sniper who came to Afghanistan to fight the Mujahideen, but stayed to protect civilians from all sides. She was killed 3 years ago defending a girls' school from Taliban fighters. Sarah examined the rifle with professional appreciation. It was a work of art, perfectly balanced and fitted with optics that were probably worth more than most people's cars. "How many of us are there?" "More than you might think. Fewer than we need." Amira poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks into the morning air. "We are not an organization. We do not have ranks or commanders or official missions. We are individuals who have chosen to use our skills to protect those who cannot protect themselves." Over the next several hours, Amira outlined the reality of the life Sarah was choosing. They would live off the grid, moving constantly, relying on local networks of support from people who understood their mission. Their enemies would include not just terrorists and criminals, but sometimes government forces who saw unauthorized operators as threats to official policy. The work is dangerous. The pay is non-existent, and the only recognition you will receive is the knowledge that somewhere, children are sleeping safely because of what you did, Amira concluded. "Are you certain this is what you want?" Sarah thought about the man with his child in the courtyard, about the 9 students who had gone home to their families, about all the times she had followed orders that felt wrong, because following orders was what soldiers did. "I'm certain." That afternoon, Sarah Mitchell, former Navy SEAL sniper, officially became someone else entirely. She destroyed her military identification, abandoned her old name, and began learning the skills that would make her invisible to the governments and organizations that would be looking for her. Amira became both teacher and partner, showing Sarah how to navigate the complex world of unauthorized operations, how to build networks of local support, and how to choose battles that actually mattered. They worked together for 6 months, moving through Afghanistan, Pakistan, and eventually into other regions where civilians needed protection from forces their governments couldn't or wouldn't confront. The legend of the Falcon grew to include stories of 2 ghost snipers who appeared whenever innocent people were threatened. Some reports spoke of sisters, others of teacher and student, but all agreed that they moved like smoke and struck with the precision of death itself. 3 years later, Sarah received word that her former unit was rotating back to Afghanistan. She and Amira positioned themselves on a familiar ridge overlooking forward operating base Chapman, watching through scopes as new soldiers arrived to begin their own tours of duty. "Do you ever regret it?" Amira asked as they watched fresh-faced Marines unload equipment from transport helicopters. Sarah considered the question, thinking about the people they had saved, the missions they had chosen, the life she had built outside the boundaries of official authority. In her pack were dozens of small carvings she had made herself, eagles, hawks, falcons, each representing someone she had protected or a battle she had won on her own terms. "Never," Sarah replied, adjusting her scope to watch the new arrivals. "Some of them will follow orders their entire careers and never question whether those orders make sense. But maybe one or two will learn to think for themselves. And if they do?" Sarah smiled, remembering her own journey from obedient soldier to someone who chose her own battles. "Then maybe we'll have new legends to tell." As the sun set over the mountains of Afghanistan, two snipers known only as myths disappeared back into the terrain that had shaped them both. Somewhere in the valleys below, families slept peacefully, unaware that their safety was guarded by women who had chosen protection over politics, justice over orders, and conscience over career. The legend of the Falcon lived on, whispered in a dozen languages across a dozen countries, growing stronger with each life saved and each battle won in the name of those who could not fight for themselves.